When I work with my clients and we talk about system dynamics and understanding how the environment, people, and the economy are all linked, I always remind all of us to remember that the environment nourishes people and people create economies. Yes, everything is connected and the order matters. It's a dependent relationship. The environment nourishes people and people create economies. And it's up to us to decide whether those economies regenerate or deplete. Now, with the passing of Bill C-5 and the Build Canada Act in particular, the focus is shifting on how to get major projects built instead of whether or not we should build them. Here's the thing. If we'd had the wherewithal and the willingness to have done our homework in the last decade, to undertake and establish regional land use plans, utilizing a holistic cumulative effects scenario planning approach, well, today we'd be in an awesome position to make decisions on major projects way faster than it's going to be with the fast tracking option. So we'd also have the opportunity, or would have given ourselves the opportunity, to evaluate a range of alternatives, to build collaborative synergy instead of hoping we can ram it through, and certainly to increase certainty for capital investment and lower that decision-making risk. But since we didn't do our homework, now it feels like we're all going to be pulling all-nighters, cramming, just praying it's going to work out. Canada has significantly shifted its approach to major project approvals considered in the national interest. Bill C-5, officially known as the One Canadian Economy Act, received royal assent on June 26th, just a week and a half ago. The legislation consists of two main components. Part one is the opportunity to establish the Free Trade and Labour Mobility in Canada Act, which is intended to remove interprovincial trade barriers. Great idea. And part two, it enacts the Building Canada Act, which creates an expedited approval process for projects that have been designated as being in the Canadian national interest. I want to focus on part two. With the Building Canada Act in place, the Government of Canada will immediately move forward on consultations as required under the Act with provinces, territories, and Indigenous rights holders to determine the initial list of national interest projects. We're building a list. The criteria that will be weighed in those discussions and decisions include the extent to which the project will do this: strengthen Canada's autonomy, resilience, and security, provide economic or other benefits to Canada, have a high likelihood of successful execution, advance the interests of Indigenous peoples, and contribute to clean growth and to meeting Canada's climate change objectives. Well, that's quite a list. These criteria, though, are extremely important because if a project is added to the schedule of projects determined to be in the national interest, then all efforts will be focused on how to get the projects built quickly instead of whether they should be built at all. And a backgrounder provided by Canada's Intergovernmental Affairs Department says this: currently, the review process for projects can take many years to complete. Determining ahead of time that a project is in the national interest provides certainty, helping to attract investment. The intent of this act is to ensure these nation-building projects complete the federal review within 2 years. We will do this by focusing these reviews on how to get the project built instead of whether it should be built. Once the environmental and other processes and consultations with potentially impacted Indigenous rights holders are completed, the minister, still the minister at the top, the minister responsible for the act will issue a single set of binding conditions for the project. And these conditions will include mitigation measures to protect the environment and accommodation measures to respect the rights of Indigenous people. Well, got to tell you, I see a potential for a few cumulative effects dark horses to emerge from the pack here. First of all, upstream and downstream catalysts. The idea of an energy corridor seems logical, right? Approve a small linear footprint that enables the delivery of high economic value. But what this really means from a cumulative effects point of view is that we'll create a political and actually an economic need to approve many upstream and downstream projects of that corridor. I mean, it stands to simple reason that the energy corridor must be fed by energy, necessitating all the upstream projects to produce that energy. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that all that energy is going somewhere, and wherever it's going to be used. This will create an imperative for downstream resource extraction or manufacturing projects that use that energy. Or we're going to need downstream infrastructure and probably shipping traffic to send that energy to other markets. Think of liquefied natural gas or hydrogen as an example. So that's one dark horse, is focusing on these corridors is actually triggering the need for all the upstream and downstream projects, which will have far broader cumulative effects than the individual corridor project. Number 2, development begets more development. This is known. Fast-track federal approvals will probably create pressure on the provinces to create similarly expedited processes in their jurisdiction. So one will fire the other. And then the third dark horse I see coming, I see a potential regulatory black box coming. Skipping or abbreviating impact assessment altogether, or even just phases of it, is probably going to result in insufficient identification and mitigation of environmental risks, which is going to put us squarely in a reactive ambulance at the bottom of the cliff response mode. Your thoughts. The purpose of regulatory cumulative effects assessment. In edition 39 of the CFX Connection, the last one, I asked readers, what do you think is the purpose of the regulatory cumulative effects assessment? Thank you for your direct and candid responses. Here's some of the points that you shared with me. One reader shared both passive and active functions for regulatory cumulative effects assessment. On the passive side, CEA provides a repository of information that can inform various processes, such as land use planning. However, without an explicit requirement for its use, this information may just sit on the shelf, underutilized. An active role is when it's integrated into a statutory decision-making process, then CEA becomes a tool for shaping project approvals, denials, or conditional authorizations. Here, it has the potential to directly influence outcomes. Right. So one is proactive, one is responding without teeth. Another response wondered skeptically if project regulatory cumulative effects assessment is just used to pay lip service to those who want a more holistic assessment approach, or a way for governments to offload responsibility onto project proponents. Another philosophical response challenged us on a very positive note to see cumulative effects assessment as a call to humility and community. It could be a tool for each of us to identify and affirm how little we know about ourselves and our relationship with the natural world. The world of constant, complex, simultaneous, and sequential interactions among life forms and between them, ourselves included. It should allow us and compel us to pause, reflect, and it could even be a means to encourage us to slow down. Gotta say right now, it doesn't feel like the intention is to slow down.